The Rings of Power Season 2.
Took down notes here of the main storylines. As far as like in Season 2, the storylines, you got Galadriel, you got Celebrimbor and Sauron. You got the dwarfs, you got hobbits and Gandalf hanging out, and you got the Queen and Numenor, you got Isildur, you got that black elf, and like these are kind of the storylines. Tell me, Steve, are any of these storylines interesting to you? Like, what would you say is the most enticing?
Of those storylines, most of them, if not all of them, except one, are really boring. They're a chore to get through. The only one that I'm really interested in was the Sauron and Celebrimbor one. The other ones were really just like, oh, the Harfoots are trugging along with this wizard who I hope and I pray that it's not Gandalf. And then the other storyline, and Numenor, how they pronounce it, it's very, very not interesting because they want their like political stabbing in the back, kind of Game of Thrones side, but it doesn't really work because nobody cares. If you know what happens to Numenor, it's like all these people are going to be underwater and dead anyway. Spoiler alert, who cares anyway?
Galadriel is so hard to... They make her seem like she's like a teenager or whatever, but she's like, what, 5,000 something years old? Like, I feel like she's got to be mature. Like, like a normal...
Yeah.
Any adult would... Like, she just acts like a child. I don't understand. And you're like, am I really supposed to root for this person? Like, it's like making Skylar the main character, and you're like... Do I really gotta go for this? Can you not do anything better? And it's such a shame because, like, in Lord of the Rings, she's a good character, and I'd be mad if I was Cate Blanchett. I'm like, what are you doing with my character here?
You're just sullying my legacy.
Yeah, what's going on here?
Do you think, Chris, if I can pose a question to you, do you think the writers are wiser beyond our understanding in that they set up this character in season 1 to be so unlikable, and that they have these 5 seasons to create and mold her into the Cate Blanchett-esque character at the end? Do you think they have the wherewithal to do that?
Well, I was hoping that they would take all the backlash and make her better season 2, but so far she's just as, if not more, annoying.
I do like that that shows that there's a lot less of her.
I know. My favorite, I was like, my favorite episode was probably the last episode where I'm like, she wasn't really in it, and I prefer that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you think they're going to give her a nice redemption here? And
I would like to think so, but history tells us otherwise, that they were so consumed with making Galadriel this girl boss and scourge of the orcs and commander of the northern armies and all this garbage that wasn't in the books. And I'm hesitant to give you the benefit of the doubt to do this right, but I don't know, man. I will say season 2 is shaping up to be slightly more interesting than the first season.
Maybe I'm a changed man, but I thought this season was a chore to get through. If I wasn't doing a podcast, I would have probably just, all right, I tried my best and I'm done after like halfway through the first episode, but I was like, oh, I kind of have to watch it for this. So I powered through, but I was just like, I don't care about any of this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being harsh.
I mean, your opinions are valid, Chris, and you're not wrong. I think it's just like middling TV. I think what really bugs me is like, you have rich history and like really great source material from Tolkien, and YouTubers have been doing better justice to these stories than these guys, like Hunt for Gollum, that fan flick on YouTube. And I know they don't have access to all the source material. They're kind of limited in terms of like writing, but it's just kind of middling for me. Like, it's not horrible. It's not as bad as everyone's saying, but it's not as good as it could be. One big qualm that I have is your communication could save everyone a lot of time and effort, because like we said, towards the end of season 1, she doesn't tell anyone that Sauron's Sauron. And they tell Celebrimbor, is like, hey, do not talk to Sauron. Whatever you do, he's a bad guy. But they say, don't talk to Halbrand.
Yeah.
They don't tell him that he's Sauron. And in this one, he is like, hey, Halbrand, I'm not supposed to talk to you. Galadriel said not to talk to you. But of course, he goes and talks to him. And that results in him forging more rings and whatever. But I'm like, this could have been, if you would have sent a raven, even just like spent a second of forethought, been like, let me just double check Galadriel real quick. Before I let you in my house. I could have saved everyone. But yeah, I'm kind of holding out hope for it. I actually, contrary to you, Christopher, I thought the first episode was one of the probably the strongest one of the 3.
Wow.
And I really liked the first 20, 25 minutes or so, where it kind of shows Sauron's back. And I actually liked Christopher. I'd liked seeing Venom back on screen again in his symbiote form. I liked how they showed that he can have different forms, and like the bloody, like oily, gross bit was, I think, really interesting because like he doesn't have a physical form, and it's kind of like he's like a parasite, like rolling around, just kind of this gross thing. But it did fall apart when you saw it like falling down the hill, like Venom would say, like a turd in the wind.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that
Like
bit where he like trips and falls down? It just looks really funny to me.
Yeah.
I think the character of Adar is pretty interesting too, played by a different actor, but I think he's doing a good job trying to emulate the season 1 actor. I think that character is pretty interesting to me because it's like he has control over these orcs and he like shows love for them and he calls them sons and daughters and stuff. At the very beginning, he betrays Sauron and kills that form of him. Does he actually care for these orcs, or is he like just using them with the pretense of like loving them to use them for his purpose, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I was like, that could be an interesting plot thread if they do anything with it. And then another positive I have was I thought Celebrimbor, as kind of thick as he is, they kind of do portray him as a little bit boneheaded. I get his motivation to a certain extent because his father is Feanor, who created the Palantirs, and he's like the biggest bad of the blacksmiths of all of Middle-earth and all of Numenor. And so Celebrimbor is desperate to make a name for himself. And so that's when Anatar, the sharer of gifts, the Lord of Gifts, comes. And I think they do a somewhat decent job of putting that kind of temptation in his way, that even though he knows that there's these rings, that he has an opportunity to make a name for himself and creating these rings of power. I think that's the one plot thread I'm most interested in, is seeing Anatar using his form to manipulate and like just kind of use Celebrimbor to make these rings. I think that's the most promising part of the whole series. And I think they do a good job. I think Charlie Vickers does a convincing enough job as Adar, but he looks ridiculous if you ask me. But I don't know. Those are some of the positives that I had in my book. What about you?
I would say my main positive is when there is action, it looks good. But the problem is there's like 1 minute of action and like 3 hours of TV so far. But
there is very little action, yeah.
Kind of a backhand. But when it is, I'm like, all right, here we go. There's elf guys killing a bunch of these wild men, and then, all right, back to nothing. But that was kind of it for me. I don't know. For once, I'm the hater and Steve's the lover here, but
don't you guess that's the wrong word to put. I'm the optimistic one in this one because I just see so much hate and divisiveness about this show, and I'm like, there's a lot of people who put their heart and soul into this. Like, it's visually really good. Like, it looks great, right? And that's a positive I had for the first season, too.
Do you know what the budget is per episode, Steve?
Ouch. I don't like to talk. It's tacky to discuss finances, Christopher,
right.
But I'll indulge you and say maybe like $100 million an episode. I don't know.
It's roughly 60, but...
Oh, jeez. I'm interested to see how it goes. If nothing else, we get to talk about stuff. If nothing else, Chris, we get to have a dialogue and a conversation about it.
Maybe I'm just in a bad mood today or something.
No, I get it. Watch me. By the end of this, when we do a recap episode of this, we'll switch sides and I'll be like, this was the worst. It's ruined my childhood.
Yeah, this is a disgrace.
It's a disgrace to the human race and to J.R. Tolkien's memory. Thanks for watching these highlights of our episode of the Stale Popcorn Podcast. If you want to listen to the full episode, check out the links in the description. Please like, share, and subscribe, and if you do that with your favorite YouTuber, I'm sure they would appreciate it too. Thanks, and have a great day.
Popcorn!